No worries. All right, guys. So, we just wanted to have a bit of chat, as Kyle said, about some things to do with the relationships between fighters and trainers, and those transitions and how it changes as we get going, and the different ways to battle with it. And I know a lot of the people watching who are instructors who are trainers of fighters as well, or have in the past, or are currently doing it, and it can be really tough as a trainer for different elements and different reasons, and particularly as we go through the journey of it. And it's the same for fighters. Very tough for them in different parts of their career, and different elements of when they need to look for different things out of a coach, or how to fill their game and work on their game in little bit different ways. So there's some of the things we were wanting to sort of touch on, but we're going to make it pretty open. We haven't done any practice or rehearsals here. We're trying to sit social distancing. So before we get started, I want to do our proper introduction. So Dylan Walker is started with us as a young teenager, training here at SMAC, and competed at amateur levels. When he was 18, we sent him over to Thailand for a month. He trained at a small gym, family gym over there, but a very tough, raw gym. In fact, two of the young people from that gym, one's gone on to now, I think he's about 17, fighting at Lumpini and Rajamadurm, and the sister is in the Olympic boxing team for Thailand currently as well. So that was a massive experience for Dylan. Not much English, hard thing, so we'll get onto that a little bit later. He then went into fight in Italy in the amateur world events over there, and came home with a silver. And then went on to a professional career, but he's also transitioned into coaching and preparing fighters in the amateur team. So at only 22, he's already been through a wide experience of things, and it doesn't mean that either element of that has gone. So he can still compete, he can still continue to train. And Sugar Kane Watts started with us as a young teenager too. I think about 14 when you did your first.
14 or 15, I think.
14 or 15, and started in the kickboxing classes with us. Ended up, when he was about 18, I guess, 18, 19, you had your fight or something?
24.
Oh, very good.
24,
So there was a little bit of gap there for a while. Go back to training. Ended up, competing out in the northern suburbs of Melbourne against an absolute giant for his first fight. Fought again in Thailand, and then transitioned into amateur boxing. And then his career in boxing really took off with a lot of hard work, and he scaled the heights up to being a contender for a world title in Paris in November last year, in a stadium of 50,000 people, against one of the top, well, of course, a world champion at the moment, but he's also one of the top pound-for-pound boxers in the world. And Kane's career also isn't over. He's still competing or getting ready to compete now as well. So we want to look at, talk to those guys about some of those aspects and some of the things they've been through. So the first thing I wanted to put to it, and Kane, I'll start with you. When you first decided to have a fight and you wanted to get into the ring, what sort of experiences can you remember back to the sort of experience that it was? Like you went from, okay, I'm just doing training, to I'm going to step in the ring. Did you do much to go from training to that first fight, or was it just like, I'm just going to have a crack?
I'd sort of only ever trained in between football seasons to keep fit, because Dad was training with you a fair bit obviously back then. So I'd sort of had enough with my football career, and my grandfather actually was a fighter, I found out, and he got pretty sick, so I wanted to have my first fight before he passed away. So I only sort of ever set out to have that one fight to sort of make him proud, and then just after transitioning from a group sport into an individual sport, I fell in love with that aspect of it, and just after that first fight, that just egged me on to keep pushing forward with that.
Cool. So when you went from, okay, I want to have a fight, training probably changed a bit, but it wouldn't have changed a massive amount. It wasn't like you went into fight camp.
It was with that first fight. I went from a football mentality where we were drinking Friday to Sunday, and when I decided to have that first fight, I went cold turkey, no drinking, no going out. I had birthday parties and everything. that I didn't go to, and yeah, it was a huge culture shock for me going from one extreme to the other. But yeah, that's probably the part what I fell in love with and what egged me on, sort of thing. So
yeah, good. I guess for some of us who train in this for a long time, we're not used to that football top culture or that club culture. Yeah. So it's interesting for someone that's come from that background to see that real big change.
And although they're totally different, there's still the team aspect when you get into it, like with yourself, trainers and guys that are a part of the team. It's just a small, more tight-knit team. Yep. And the mentality of going out and getting loose on the weekends is totally different, obviously.
And Dill, how old were you when you had your first amateur fight?
First amateur, I think, was 15, I think. So I had a couple of interclubs before that one, and then amateur, I think.
And also your first interclub, let's say right from the very start. Yep. So your training, when you first made that decision, was there much difference for you? Or?
No, I was only, so for the interclub I was only about 13, I think, and Nathan approached me and he said, I think you should do this, and I didn't really know what it was, like, alright, and it was only maybe 2 weeks out kind of thing, so there's not much you can do in 2 weeks. I just kept coming to classes, and then it just went with it, I guess.
I think for our younger members specifically, like those young teens, that's pretty much the way it almost needs to be. We don't want to build it up for them to be like a world title fight, that first fight, and the fitness level needs to be there, but as young competitors, they're generally fairly fit. Now, I'm not saying that for all young people we shouldn't work on them and really skill them up. We obviously do want to do that, but when they're first having that crack, you first want to see if they're going to enjoy it before you put months of work and then putting months of work in of extra hard training. So it sort of starts to build in that process. So you guys, you got into those first few fights and you obviously loved it. Both of you enjoyed it. And I know both of you had not always the greatest results at the start. You'd have really good wins and then you might have a loss, or you have opponents pull out. So there's some tough experiences in those first years. The first 5 fights are the hardest, I reckon, because getting matchups you think would be the easiest, but they fall through all the time. The frustration of that can be what stops most people. So, Kane, if you can talk us through that early part in your amateur career as a boxer now.
Yeah, I had many occasions where I'd roll up to the Calabria Club there, where's the main place for all the amateur boxing in Victoria. I'd roll up and the guy I was meant to fight had pulled out and they'd replace him with someone else, and just that disheartening feeling of thinking you're going in against someone and then they've thrown someone else in. Like,
bit of uncertainty.
But it's character building. Like you learn from that and you use that in your next sort of outings. Because nothing, as much as you want it to, nothing ever goes to plan with your fight. Not one bit.
And I guess going back to that football thing, you could know this team and have played them for a few times, but then they switch who you're on for that day. Yeah, and it can change the whole game for you as well.
Of course. Yeah, it's a massive thing to. Well, at the start it was like your whole world was coming crashing down. I still remember flashbacks now of I think it was my second or third fight. I'd been mind-setting myself to go up against this guy for weeks and weeks, and then I rolled up and they'd thrown some other big 6-foot buddy New Zealander in against me. I was just disheartened, but you learn from that, and that just gives you a stronger mindset for pushing forward, I think.
And Dill, some of the things we talk about when you're getting ready for those first few fights, and we try and talk to our new amateurs, and I've said the same thing to you when you're coming through, is don't start looking for your opponent. Particularly interclub days, for instance. Don't try and guess who that guy is that you're going to be fighting, because then you get fixated on it. Yeah. Number one, you pick a bigger guy than you should. And you start to panic, and then he's not the guy that steps up, and you've got to change it.
Like most of the time, they always Facebook them, even if I tell them not to. They always do it, and it's never what you want to see. They're always expecting like 80 kilos. They're like, oh yeah, hopefully it's a short, fat dude, and it's always some 6-foot jack dude. It's like, oh, does you feel better now for looking that guy up? Awesome. Like,
I felt the exact same way with my first fight. I had the poster of me and the guy I was fighting. It's about my height. I rolled up and he's 6'7", but he's towering over me.
At Kane's weigh-in, so this guy was ginormous, and at the weigh-in, so we're like, oh, this is going to be hard on the courage and stuff. So I've gone up to him with Kane's dad and I said, "Oh mate, can we get a photo with you before the fight tomorrow night?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Yeah, because you're not going to look the same tomorrow, mate." You know. And I'm thinking, I better put some bravado out here.
I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I had to drive out to Footscray, stripping off in my undies in some dodgy looking pub with those weirdos in it. Then we're driving to the fight. There's burnout cars on the side of the road. Had to get metal detected on the way in.
It was a rough place.
Didn't know what you were setting me up for.
The thing is, you know, even in that context, it doesn't necessarily change either. You know, like we've gone to some top level fights and it can feel a little bit the same.
Yeah, of course.
You know, like both of you have been to some pretty big stadiums and it's the same sort of setup, isn't it? They're all sort of the same. You know? It's you never quite know what's going to happen. You might, you know, by the higher levels, obviously know who your opponent is. You know what the whole setup is, but you never even know how that event is going to be run. You know, where are we going to be coming from? What's getting ready?
Walk in, there's riot squads and
that's right. Police are doing big shutdowns and so you can't let those outside influences affect you too much. Obviously, you know that it's happening, but you've got to try and keep your eye on the ball a little bit. And to transition to that, first of all, when you guys are in that state, obviously you're really internalising. It's very hard for other people to have a lot of influence on you, but they can, negative and positive, but you're really trying to be in your own space as much as you can. What sort of things are you expecting from your trainer or fight group? Let's say you've got 3 or 4 people or your main trainer. What sort of things are you expecting around that time the night before the fight or the day of the fight?
The thing that I sort of look for is calmness, I guess. 'Cause I as a fighter, you play the fight over and inside your head over and over for weeks, months before the fight. And I just, walking into the fight, I've got my game plan in my head. I just want reassurance that I've done my work within myself and within my team. And just, the calmness, no one stressing me out leading into it. That's a big thing that I look for and expect when I'm in the rooms.
What about you?
Yeah, I was going to say a similar kind of thing. Reassurance is definitely a big thing. I like probably specific things. Like, so I remember before a couple of the fights later on, like, or the last couple of fights I had, you were telling me specific things. You're like, "Oh man, this is looking really good," and it like was something I was like, "Oh, that is looking good," and then I would just keep using it, and it would be something like it didn't even have to be good, but as long as you told me it was good, it was like, "All right, let's do that." I get pretty nervous before fights, so as long as people aren't in my ear the whole time, I'm normally all right.
And now that you're having to do that as a trainer as well, is that something that you've tried to reflect on and give back?
Yeah, so it sometimes can be hard to read certain people, and some people are very easy to kind of suss out how they're feeling. So I kind of just play with certain things or ask them well before the fights. I'm like, "Hey, obviously on the night of the fight, you're not really going to want to explain a lot to me. What kind of things are you wanting to get G'd up, or do you need me to calm you down? Or if it's their first time, it's hard. They don't really know what they want either, but you just got to try and go for whatever you think is the best thing."
That's right. So I would often, in those sort of situations, I'm a big one for calming people down and trying to calm the situation and be a bit of a blocker. So I try and really make it clear to the promoters, because promoters can be a really big problem. They can come into rooms and start saying just dumb stuff.
Or head trainers.
Or head trainers or managers. Or, you know, there can be a lot of things depending on the level of the fight. But often, you know, promoters are going through a lot of stress on the night. Someone didn't show up, the cards changed, the government's put a new ruling on them. So they're going through stress, and sometimes they want to release it by coming in and complaining to people they know, and they know the trainers well. But we're not in that mindset that we want to hear it, and the fighters don't want to hear it, you know. Or they'll say dumb stuff like, because sometimes they want to have money on someone, they'll say, "Oh, such and such is so sharp in the other room," you know. And it's really about protecting your fighter from hearing any of that, and also sometimes seeing the injuries that can come through the rooms. So at high level pro fighting for boxing, you're really generally in a good situation where the top level guys have their own rooms. Top level Thai fighting overseas, we can get our own room sometimes if you're the main event, but at our like state events in Victoria, for instance, you're never going to get your own room no matter what level you are. So sometimes it's even not allowing that to be seen, and that can be just as easy as the way you set up your little spot. So let's say we're all in one room here. then I might have Dylan sitting facing me, and anyone that's walking through is going to go behind him. So if I can see something's coming through that I don't like, I'll engage him in a close conversation. If I can see someone's coming through with a big trophy because they just won, I'll go, hey, check out, that just won, and our corner's winning, because as a fighter, weird shit goes through your head. 4 wins in the red corner, we're winning tonight. You hear you had 4 losses in the red corner, you start to go, fucking hell, red corner's bloody cursed, you can feel that way a bit, can't you?
Yeah, very much. I would only ever fight in the red corner up until my last 2 fights. When I was amateur, I would only ever wear red.
Yep.
That first time I wore blue, I was like, yeah, I'm losing now.
And it's part of a trainer's ability to either really try and snap them out of that and say, come on, mate, that's ridiculous. You know it's ridiculous. We've got no choice. You got it. Or you protect them from it a little bit and you emphasise the last bit. The other thing for a trainer is, like Dylan said before and Kane said, it's really about that encouragement at the end. So even if I was thinking, fucking hell, he's been dropping his, sorry for swearing, man, he's been dropping his right hand the whole time in training, I haven't been able to fix it, I'm not going to say to him the night of the fight, oh man, you've been dropping that right hand.
You're not going to reinvent the wheel in that last hour or 2
That's
hours
right.
before the fight. You just need to complement the stuff they're doing good and work on that and build that up.
So if there was 3 things that they were doing really well, it could be that the person has got down a step off that you've been working on, or they've really got some power in a shot and you know that they've got that, then that's what you would create a set in your head for their warm-up that incorporated that, and then you would just go, oh mate, no one's going to argue on that, or the power in that if you land that, that's stopping anyone tonight, or you work their defence a little bit and you're slipping beautiful. If there's something that they are struggling a little bit, then you may slip it in really slowly so that they've got a really good 100% chance of defending and checking it. So in their head, last time they did it, it worked. If you do it fast or tricky and you land it on them, in their head they're going, oh fuck, that got through. So a trainer, that last part, you've really got to be conscious of what you're doing. In the corner, have you ever been told shit that you didn't want to hear?
I was going to get bashed with a spit bucket.
Tell us about that one.
Yeah, my head trainer I've been with for many years, Ray Giles, is the king of one-liners. So, and he doesn't like me showboating or doing anything. So, yeah, he's thrown out a few over the years. He's threatened me to bash me with a spit bucket, all sorts of things.
I know as a trainer, there's been a couple of times that I've said stuff in the corner that has been negative to the fighter, as in I know after I've said it that I've had an effect that was a negative effect to them, which it still does my head in now. They're those things that play on your head when you go to sleep at night of I could have done a better job there, I could have fixed it. And it's something I've got to be really conscious of. So, Dill, there's things I've told you, other people that you've been cornered by that you went, oh, I wish I hadn't have said that, later on when you thought about it?
Yeah. So for myself, being like when I was fighting, I remember, probably not, it was a hard fight, not the fight itself, but when I was fought on Max Muay Thai, there was like 7 or 8 people in the corner, and like I reckon half of them were Thai, and for some reason there was 3 of them in the ring, and they're all screaming at me, telling to knee. And you were saying something, I don't even remember what you were saying, but I remember you screaming at me, and I was just like, oh man, I better do what Matt says. But all I could think of was these Thai people screaming knee at me. So I tried knee, and I was getting punched in the face every single time, and it was just one of those things. I was like, man, I wish I was not listening to these guys.
I was singing out, don't listen to the Tigers. So that was my fault. That was an unprepared corner person. So what had happened was we turned up to Max Muay Thai, and I had shorts on. And Max Muay Thai have a rule that as a trainer, you're not allowed to go into the corner with shorts on. Like they weren't board shorts or anything, they were proper shorts, but it was the ruling, and that was my fault, and I let Dylan down that night by not being able to get into the ring to corner him properly. What did frustrate me is we told the Thai guys, who were friends of us and people we trained with, to allow me to speak, so Dylan could still hear me, but Thais get very excited and just yell, even to their own people.
Yeah. Especially when they got money on the fight.
Yeah.
As far as like interclubs and stuff, or like for when I was teaching amateurs or interclubbers, I can remember I was coaching for Hicksy, and he was fighting this other guy, and I guess you get stuck in when you're a coach going with what you know opposed to what they know. So I was like, man, if you start clinching this guy, you're going to be all over him. He starts clinching this guy and just gets dumped. I'm like, oh, I forget that maybe other people haven't got certain skills that you maybe you have, or you haven't been practicing it often, or the other person's way better at it, and you're like, oh man, you have to stop clinching now. Like, it's hard, like you give them something and then it doesn't work immediately, you're like, oh, I wasted that corner like time.
Yes, and as a coach, you can get fixated on something you're working on, and there's that can be good or bad. So over a 12-round fight, say Kane's got a 12-round fight, and he's been working on a specific skill, and we know in the first 4 rounds that it might be hard to land and he's just got to wear the opponent down or something like that, then you've got to sit it out and believe in your plan, but when it's a 3-round fight, it's very hard to do that. So, or even a 5-round fight, if it's not working, you've got to be ready to change. And I did this to Tom once. He lost a fight in Perth. I still reckon he won, but it was borderline. But it took me 2 rounds to work out that what I was telling him wasn't going to work. I kept stupidly in my own head thinking it was going to work. As soon as I, in the 4th round, managed to get my head to change and gave him the new instruction, he made it work beautifully and won the next 2 rounds easily. But couldn't knock the guy out because the guy was like 7 foot tall and Tom's 4 foot tall. Again, it was a really good lesson for me that the game plan's good only when it's working. It's Tyson's thing, everyone's got a plan until you get hit in the face. It's the same with the trainer. Sometimes we need to slap ourselves in the face and just say, look at the fight, not think about what we wanted from the fight. You got to look at the fight at that time. What about you, Kane?
Yeah, well, that's sort of the same as the fighter and same as the trainer. You've got to be a chameleon to the situation you're in. You've got to be able to adapt and change what you're doing if it's not working. You can't just stick to one plan and try to go through with that and expect it to work.
Yeah. That's, when I fought Sam Hemming, it was something I literally was thinking in my head while I was fighting. I'm like, oh man, this boxing set that I'm doing is not working. And then I just kept doing it and I was getting punched in the face. So then at the end of the fight, I'm like, I knew it wasn't working the first round. Why did I do it for another 3 rounds? Like,
yeah, it can be hard to switch yourself out.
Yeah, well, with that also, sometimes that's where you need the support and backup from your corner to tell you what you're doing wrong, because I know a lot of fights, your corner will be telling you one thing, you think you're doing another thing, but you're not.
And this is sometimes where your corner has to come up with another way to say it. So if I've said it 4 times and it hasn't clicked, I'm going, he's hearing me, but he's not getting what I want.
And even with our training, like we were discussing the other day, like there's stuff that I'm 12 years into my professional career, and I'm still learning and picking up stuff, like minor things that and that's just from you explaining it to me a different way. Like you might have been telling me for a long time, but I'm not picking up what you're saying in my own head. But
we've got to find that thing that help makes it click. Yeah. And that's where that relationship between a trainer, a corner and a fighter is important. If someone has irregular, they're coached under one person and cornered, by a different team, which sometimes has to happen because you get flown interstate and you've got to work with another team. General instructions can still get across, but in the heat of a fight, particularly when you're getting hit, you can't analyse what someone's trying to yell at you. You'll either hear a simple word or a phrase that you've heard 1,000 times in training that makes your brain move, But if you're listening to something that you've never heard before, you're not even going to hear it. Like, it's just part of the crowd noise. And even with Kane and I now working more intensely together, we're having to come up with a dialogue together, like Kane just said. There's certain things that I'll say that in my head make perfect sense, but Kane's never heard before, so how is he meant to know what I'm telling him to do? Like I might say, weight on the right or something, and in my head I'm meaning bend your right knee, put your weight on your leg, and that's where your power's going to come from.
You're struggling to demonstrate a little bit.
I can't show it. But if Kane doesn't know what my terminology is, he's never going to know what I'm trying to get out of him, So it's that lesson too. And sometimes you'll work with someone and you'll come up with a whole new terminology, and then you'll try it on someone else and it's not going to work because they don't know it now, And it's
same as a fight. You've got to adapt to each person's needs and how they perceive things.
And even preparing for a fight. So there's some fights that you can prepare for because this person is this sort of fighter. We will adjust our training accordingly to that. But for the majority of people, particularly early in their career, your game plan should just be to be as good as you possibly can be at your fight. So you're not even really worried about what the other person's going to do or come at you with or whatever. If you're just working on making your strikes as hard as they can be, your balance as good as it can be, and your reflexes sharp, and probably number one, your fitness really high, then you've got a good chance. If you're going in there thinking, now I'm going to slip every time he throws that right, I'm going to slip out and I'm going to do this shot and then that shot, you're going to get fucked.
Less is more in the technique department.
Yeah.
Trying to picture 1,000 things you're going to do within a fight before the fight. You're not going to do them. You might do one or two or maybe three. You just need to perfect those minor things and just work on them. You're not going to be...
the first 5 fights though, you're not doing anything you practice.
My first 10 fights, I couldn't remember a thing. I had to watch a video, mate, and see what happened. I couldn't remember anything.
Yeah, half the video you're like, oh, don't remember this part. Like,
actually better than I thought. and often for a fighter, that is their feeling when they watch that tape, because sometimes they don't even want to watch a fight, you know? They go, oh, I didn't like... And you go, no, watch it, you know? And they come and they go, oh, actually... I did better than I thought I did, you know. Like
the majority of my fights, I felt like that. Like, feel like you fought one way, but you look at it and you're like, actually, I was doing things that I've been working on. I didn't even realise I was doing.
And your body registers the hits that get hit on it, but your body doesn't register the hits you land on the other person. So your calculation on the fight is all wrong, you know. And that's where you got to really listen to your corner. When you come back to your corner and your corner...
on the canvas.
Yeah, unless you're out, then you've really calculated it. But that's where your corner really has got to help you in the rounds, because it can be, say it's a 5-round fight, then, and my fighter's starting to get tired around fight 3, but he's won the first 2, then I might be able to give some advice like, just keep moving around in this round. Don't have to go in too hard. You've got the first 2. We can control this, and we're going to come out hard in the last 2 rounds. You know, and you can give them that space. In their head, though, they might be thinking, "No, I got pounded. You've got to really get that message across. That this take a break, and vice versa. I've had fighters that really think that they've won a round easily, and it's like you haven't. Like you tripped him over once, but he's landed like four really clean shots. You know, so getting that message across that no, you've got to work hard in this round, mate. You haven't got the judge's score yet, you know.
I think that's one of the best and worst things I did when I first started fighting was, or like amateurs, the WKA did a refereeing and judging course here, and it was awesome because I was like, man, okay, now I know what the good scoring shots are, now I know this, that, and the other, but I fixated on that so much. Now I'm trying to fix it now, but it's just still in my head like, oh man, I shouldn't throw punches because they don't score for anything, but it's just like, sometimes I could just win with just punches because I'm only trying to round kick and getting destroyed every time I do it. Like it's just, I just get fixated.
And you can take out all those set-up shots. So in boxing, you've got a couple of moves. You know? But if you're not playing that, if you're not making the other person have to think the whole time, and same in Thai, Tum wins fights by doing this. and the person can't read whether they're going to throw a shot because now he's moved and he's out of range, or they're going to get hit by a shot, you know, and it's the same when you hold pads, you know, or when you're hitting pads. If someone moves their hand that much, you pop your elbow out, you know. In a fight, your brain goes, I'm going to land, but it's calculating too, like, oh, don't put too much power in this because he's going to move or he's going to do something, you know. All these games going on.
Not with me, generally.
What do you mean, mate?
Normally, if you're standing in front of me with the pads, I'm trying to hit him as well.
Well, that's true. You are. But sometimes you do pull your elbow because my arm goes back. You get sick of getting hit. Hang on, I'm just going to keep an eye on time. So we've got a few minutes, which is good. So what I wanted to talk a little about is that relationship between a trainer and a fighter. And I'm going to give a little bit of my perspective first and then get a bit off you guys. So as a trainer, those first few fights when someone wants to fight, there's a relationship building and you're working with someone and getting them ready. But it's not really until you're spending solo time with that person that that relationship really starts to develop, and that you, in the relationship where you have to start really trusting each other. So there's always a team around you and there's always a fight group, but at some point it becomes 2 of you are the core of the relationship, you know, like, and it doesn't just mean that it's only those 2 people. So it's me and the fighter now, but it could be tomorrow he's got to work with this other coach or this other trainer on another aspect of something. So then they've got a special relationship. But it can take time for that to build. So it's not usually in the first few fights, I don't think. I find for me that it's usually a few in, or when the fighter really starts listening, when I'm thinking they're getting this now, they're tuned in with me and now we're moving together, you know, there's that sort of feeling in it. What about you guys? Have you...
Yep.
I guess for me, in my experience, it's taken a while, even with you, I think, to gain the respect out of my trainer, and then to understand that I'm here for real and I'm going to be putting the work in. I'm not just here for the easy run or whatever. I had that with my coach Ray Giles as well. It took probably a year of me just training in that gym for him to realise that I was the real deal and I was going to be putting in and that I wanted to be there. Like you guys would see a million guys come and go that say they want to fight. Would probably out of 10 you might get one or two that are actually fair income about it. They'll have one or two fights and they'll realise that it's not all glitz and glam, getting punched in the face or your legs chopped up.
And I think for you and I, Kane, for me in particular, it was probably one of the trips in Queensland where we went up for sparring, and I thought what sold it for me was I thought Kane actually does want my help. So up until then, it wasn't that I didn't believe it wasn't the real deal. I didn't know whether you just wanted a buddy to travel with, or you wanted
it took you a while to knew that I was actually valuing your input.
That's right. Yeah. So because we had to go from originally trainer fighter thing to then just being mates for like 15 years and supporting each other, to then going into that role a little bit again. So it was probably harder for me than for you because you knew that you wanted it, but I didn't know if I wanted it or if it was real, you know.
And that's a hard thing. You can't just take someone's word for that. You need to see it yourself and experience.
You've got to feel it. It's got to be, they appreciate something you've said and given them, and you've appreciated that they've tried it because it might be out of the bounds of what they would normally do. And when that happens, and it might be what happens is you just share a really hard experience, and the hard experience might be a hard spar, a training day where you just exhausted, or something shit just happens in life, or good, and that can be the experience that catapults it to you.
I guess it was only probably my last couple of fights I felt like I could properly listen and do the things that you were saying. So, and I don't even think that I dialed it in 100%. I think it was getting better, but it definitely wasn't as good as it could be. I think now that I'm coaching and got a lot more like amateurs and with the Australian team and whatnot, now I'm getting higher up in the amateurs and doing it more frequently. Seeing the frustration from my point of being a coach and then them not listening, it's just like, man, I can only imagine how annoyed everyone else was at me when it's just like I do something, I'm like, oh, that's definitely not what I said. So I think by coaching, it would make it a lot easier for me to now go, all right, this is the things they want to do, and it works because they can see it from another angle. So I guess that's not for everyone. They don't have to coach for that to click, but for me, I think it's click from coaching more often. That's how I would click into getting that the listening aspect, I guess, a bit better, and working together, moulding it a bit better.
Good, and I think part of that is maturity as well. You just get older and you get used to the game. That relationship also has some hard drawbacks. So some of those hard drawbacks can be working out when the relationship is no longer healthy for either person. So sometimes as a trainer, you can be tired. You can be tired of the fight game, or you can be tired of training that person. Their relationship's no longer as good as it was. Or for the fighter, they've got to sometimes realise that this trainer can only take me so far. Like, this trainer doesn't want to travel, or this trainer doesn't want to give up extra time, or this trainer has a really good skill sets, but I'm not picking them up off them. But I want to be real about this. And the fighter's only got so many years to do that in, and that can be really hard. And I think from my point of view as a trainer, I want to say to trainers, if that's the fighter's decision, you want to support them and let them do that, And if they come back, they come back, and if they don't, they don't. But it's their life. The trainer, we're going to have another student, and if we don't, so what? That we've got to control our life. We don't control their life, and the fighter is about fighting, and they should have the absolute ability to change it. Now, when I'm saying that, I don't mean someone should go and swap and change every 6 months, because they're going to learn absolutely nothing. But if the career needs to move, the career needs to move, and there's going to be lots of things that can get in the way. It could be in my own relationship that I've decided I want to spend more time with my family or my wife, then that can hold up my fighter for 3 years and destroy his whole career. So Kane, have you ever felt in a quandary with a trainer or something where you've built up a relationship and you've had trouble moving, or has it always been pretty good?
With my amateur trainer, he got me started obviously with boxing, and I just got to a point where it was the same stuff every day, and I was lucky enough to have a few other professional fighters at that time that give me some advice and put me on to my main trainer at the moment, Ray. But and that was the hardest decision, and heartbreaking just being able to tell him that I was moving on. But you have to. If you want to go somewhere and they can't take you there, then they're hard choices you got to make. It's not a personal thing in any way, but yeah, I've been very lucky myself in the people I've had around me advising me and stuff. So yeah, it's been a good thing for my career.
We had a different trainer taking most of the fighters here when I first started, and then obviously he moved on, and I had to make a decision on where I wanted to train, and I ended up having a meeting with you, and my mum was here because I was young, and I remember you not really, well, it wasn't that you didn't care, but it was just like, hey man, like it was one of those things you weren't sure, because I was only young and I hadn't been training long. You were like, make your own decision. But for me, I was like, man, this is what I want to do, and I don't know which to pick. And I finally picked to stay here, and then other than that, there's not really that many other things, other than I guess some of the amateurs that I had a lot to do with, like Timmy and Steve-O and stuff, who would move on to train with you a bit more. But it's not that it was an unhealthy relationship. It was just at the time, and even now, you have a lot more time and a lot more to offer them as far as in the professional race.
Yeah, and I know that's a really tough thing for you to have to go through each time. You know, you feel like you build them up and stuff, and then I go and steal them when they've got some skill, some promise, you know. But it's good for me. No, so it's a tough thing for Dylan to go through. I mean, the good thing is that they're not leaving the surroundings, and Dylan's usually there on the fight nights and often as part of their training process anyway. But it is still tough, you know. That's a hard thing to do. We're about to finish off, but I wanted to just go through the trainer-fighter relationship is really important, but the majority of the fighters' training is on their own. If you commit to wanting to be a fighter, your time of getting under coaches is probably like you'll be lucky to get an hour every couple of days, or if you're really lucky, maybe an hour a day, but most likely 20 minutes to 30 minutes of real. They're going to guide you, maybe 20 minutes of they're going to watch you and tell you to work fucking harder, you know. Sorry, I didn't mean to swear. So it's mainly on your own. So Kane, you've been doing it a long time now.
I look at it and people say like you're being gifted like the way you fight. All of it, I wasn't gifted with anything better than anyone else out there. Bar the fact probably that I was self-motivated, that I got that kick and that enjoyment out of going and training on my own. The millions of hours that I put into bloody going out running, being lucky enough to come to gyms that I've had access to put in training sessions with no one in the gym bar myself. Like it's just that's been the one thing that I've loved about the sport, and it's just driven me through. I think it's like my meditation.
So you will often put in, when you're preparing for a fight, you might do a couple of hours a day, but you're probably only under tutelage, I don't know, 30 minutes every couple of days.
Big fights, I would do 3 sessions a day. So I'd have yourself or Ray take me through a skill session, then I'll do a fitness session, maybe with a trainer or generally on my own, and then I'll do like a recovery session where I'll just go to the C-bars or do something just to take the weight off my body and rest it, which is also on my own. It's just, that's another good thing with fighting, just clearing your mind and just taking the weight off to ease your mind and relax your body.
And even sometimes with a trainer, you move location, like for job and for life, and then Kane has to travel like an hour and 40 minutes to hour and 20 minutes if the traffic's not too bad, to train with Ray, and that's part of the reason why I'm his sort of assistant to work some of the stuff that he gets off Ray, because it's just really hard to do that regularly. You know?
Even with that last fight, like the sparring we had to do, we were flying back and forth to Brisbane. Sometimes we'd fly up there, spar, and then fly home the next flight back. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was big toll. And Dill, for you with the training on your own?
Yeah. I guess, you learn and hope from your trainer, and hopefully you get a bit of cardio out of it, and the skill work and whatnot. But the skill work and whatnot, it has to be repeated so many times. Not even funny, they'll show you something, but if you're not practicing it on the bag or in the air for a couple of hours a week, then it's not going to matter. Like that one session, you're not going to be able to learn it. And like I said before, I get pretty nervous before fights, and I found in my last few fights that the way that I was able to eliminate it a lot was to just clear any of my doubt, especially as far as fitness. That was my biggest thing. Was I just was like, man, I got to keep myself for these rounds so I can work the last round or whatever. So it got to a point where I almost got a kick out of just punishing myself. So runs, I had to go, all right, it had to be this time, and then someone else would beat it. And I'd be like, I can't let him be the fastest in the gym. I have to try and beat that time. And then I'd do the pads. I'm like, if I had any doubt on the fight day, I'm like, oh man, remember that session 5 weeks ago where I didn't do those sit-ups? I'm like, I knew that would just play on me. So I had to make sure that everything was done, and everything had to be done like a lot, or else I would just be too nervous on the day.
Excellent. Guys, we're about to finish. I just want to, last thing is talking about the crowd sizes and the different stadiums. It can really affect you, and positives and negatives and stuff. But Kane's first real big show was with Danny Green, 15,000. You did Hyson's, how much?
Yeah, 15.
15,
yeah. Around 15,000 there. Yeah.
And part of your prep was to be able to block that out. So he got to perform in front of a massive crowd, and your prep is to block it out.
Pretty much. I was seeing a psychologist for probably 6 weeks leading up to that. Just how to block the crowd out, and I still remember now, just walking out, it was like I had blinkers on. I look back at the crowd now and I'm blown away by how many people were there. I can't remember anyone there.
So it's a funny sport, like it's hard to get to the top, and when you get up there and then, a massive stadium of 50,000 for the last fight.
That was my biggest fear though, walking out there and letting the crowd get a hold of me, and that not being beaten by skill or whatever, but being beaten by the crowd.
So when people first start fighting, generally their biggest fear is looking like a fool. It's not about getting knocked out. It's not about getting beaten. They don't want to look like an idiot, And that's never what happens. Everyone appreciates the fact you get in the ring. You will be surprised when you've had fights and someone knows you're a fighter, they'll just think that you've won every fight and that you've had a stupid amount of fights. They'll have no idea what your real record is or what you've really done. The thing is, people will just admire people that get in there and have a go. It doesn't matter whether it's fighting or anything else. People just admire people that have a go. So try and get rid of that fear. It's the hardest fear to get rid of, but that's generally the fear we carry in. I don't want to look like a fool.
Yeah. Massively.
Yeah.
And it's the same for the trainer from the behind. We don't want to have let you down either. We're in there for you guys. That's our full time. We could keep going on forever. But thank you all for your attention. Kyle, I'll pass it back.